Before I open the meeting, can I ask any members or officers in physical attendance with an electronic device to mute it to avoid feedback? Can I ask any remote participants to keep their camera and microphone off unless they wish to speak, and ideally not to use the camera facility at all, as this can affect the quality of the meeting. Please be advised that the meeting may be recorded and data collected during the recording of the meeting will be retained in accordance with the Council's data retention policy. A recording of the meeting may be added to the Council's website. Members accessing the meeting remotely should use their SBC or KCC laptop to participate virtually. If you join using the link on the website or on a mobile and tablet device, it's not always possible to identify you, and you may not be recorded as in remote attendance. Can I ask members to speak loudly and clearly, and it may be necessary to stand closer to the OWL system here in order that remote participants can hear clearly. Welcome everyone to this extraordinary Environment Committee meeting, particularly any visiting members attending remotely and any members of the public. The following staff are in attendance in the meeting room: the head of Environment and Leisure, Martin Cassell, the Environmental Services Manager, Alistair Andrews, and from Democratic Services, Philippa Davis. Attending remotely are the head of Regeneration and Neighbourhoods, Emma Wiggins, the interim head of Finance, Duncan Ellis, the head of Finance, Claire Stanbury, and from Democratic Services, Billy Attaway. Are there any other officers in attendance? Okay, so there's no fire drill planned, and if the alarm sounds, those in attendance should leave via the exits indicated to the left and one at the rear, and you should assemble outside where directed. If anyone requires assistance, please make themselves known. So can I ask if there are any apologies for absence and confirm any substitutes, Philippa?
Thank you, Chair. There are no apologies. There's a full committee here this evening.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Can I ask if there are any declarations of interest? Oh, thank you. So we're going to move to item 4, but before we do that, I wanted to explain how I was planning to deal with the items this evening. So you'll be aware that item 4 is an open item for questions and discussions. At the point that we've exhausted questions and discussions for the open item, I'm going to propose that we move to item 6, which is the information which is commercially sensitive. So I would then propose item 5 on the agenda, which is moving into private session. So I hope everyone's comfortable with that. And after we've had the discussion under agenda item 6, I will ask someone to move the recommendations. Okay, so agenda item 4 is the procurement of the waste and street cleansing services, and I'm going to ask Martin Cassell to introduce this item for us.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. You'll forgive me for quite a lengthy introduction to this report. As you can see, the report is fairly detailed, and whilst I won't cover every part of it in my intro, I think there are some key points that we need to gather. So the report is the culmination of 2 years worth of work. Actually, the work started even a lot before that, and I know there are lots of you that have been involved in the process for that long period of time. The review's been led by Mid-Kent officers, so myself and my team and the equivalents in Ashford and Maidstone, with the support of external consultants who bring their industry knowledge. There's been input from member waste working groups at each of the council throughout that period. The Cabinet report in June 21 made a number of key decisions, and that was looking at what priorities we wanted for a waste and street cleansing service, whether we wanted to remain as part of the Mid Kent Waste Partnership, which is this combination with, I've just been put off by a balloon going, I thought that was a camera or a drone or something, apologies. Whether we remain as part of the Mid Kent Partnership, which is with Ashford and Maidstone Borough Councils, and Kent County Council, who are the disposal authority, are also party to that partnership. That Cabinet report opted to stay collecting our recycling in the method that we currently do, which is putting all of the material commingled into the one bin. And it also understood the feedback from residents and from members during the working groups on the need to improve the street cleansing service. So that was made one of the key priorities that you'll see in the report. It was also importantly decided to continue contracting out the service. So it was certainly something that was well considered by Cabinet and the working groups at the time and officers. And despite the challenging tender process that you can see that we've been through, it remains the recommended option. The tender process started November last year, so over a year ago, and it's been through 4 really robust stages, including 2 intensive rounds of what we call competitive dialogue. The report talks a little bit more about that, but that's where bidders and the councils get the opportunity to talk about the key matters at a number of different stages and try and devise the best specification possible to meet the priorities that were set by Cabinet back in 21. Bidders raised a number of concerns along the way. We've talked about those in a previous extraordinary committee. Prices have risen considerably due to the global impacts, whether that be the Ukraine war, whether that be the pandemic, and the resultant economic instability. Those bidders also made very clear that they were unable to source the vehicles in time for October 23, which is when the 10-year contract formally came to an end. So you'll recall that we had an extraordinary Environment Committee back in August, which asked for an extension through to the 23rd or 24th of March 24 in order to give the bidders the opportunity to source the vehicles and start the new contract. Depot provision has been an interesting debate during the tender, and there's a section in the report that talks about that. Whilst we're happy with the proposed company's offer for this contract term, what we ask for is a recommendation for officers to have a look at future depot provision options that may be able to be suitable for either future waste and street cleansing contracts or grounds maintenance contracts. So the final stage of the tender closed at the end of October, and we received 1 compliant bid. Officers from all 3 authorities, Ashford, Maidstone and Swale, then went through an intensive process of evaluating the bid and are in full agreement that it meets the objectives that we set out in that June 21 Cabinet report. As a result, all 3 councils have drafted reports to recommend awarding the contract to Company A. Ashford's Cabinet unanimously passed their report on Thursday of last week, and Maidstone are in a room similar to us tonight, proposing the same recommendation as ourselves. The Company A bid for Swale sees additional resource put into waste collections, and that is in part due to the high levels of refuse that residents continue to put in their bins. Mainly since the pandemic, we saw a big spike of obviously people working and staying at home more, and we haven't seen those tonnages of the green bin come down in the way that we would like. So that needs more resources out there. And also Kent, as I mentioned, are our disposal authority, so they take the waste that we collect, and they've made a change to where we're able to tip the waste And so that's meant that we've needed to add in extra resource on the waste collection side as well. The street cleansing bid is strong in our opinion. They propose more flexible teams spread across 7 days a week and spread across the day. So you will see different shifts of street cleansers rather than just that initial morning or daytime shift. The technology that they are offering will give us more information on street cleansing than we've ever had before, and that will mean that we're able to respond to residents' queries and complaints in much more real time. They provide a number of environmental gains. One of the key priorities was to try and reduce the carbon footprint of the service, and a number of social value initiatives that I won't go through in detail in my intro, but happy to answer questions on as they're in the report. So whilst I'm not going to talk about the detail of the appendices in my introduction, there is an increase in contract cost. Undoubtedly, that puts pressure on the medium-term financial strategy. That is the same for all three authorities and is being seen across the country for those that are tendering their services at the moment. The governance route, so tonight this committee will be responsible for deciding whether to award the contract to Company A or not. That is completely the decision of this committee. That will, however, be a provisional until we go on to the 4th of January, because Policy and Resources and Council are required to make a decision around putting the funding of the fleet into the capital programme. And I'll explain a little bit more when we get into questions around why it can't wait until the 22nd of February when the budget is agreed. Should the recommendations be adopted this evening, there will be a period where we will finalise the drafting of the contracts, and then we will enter into a mobilisation period, hopefully from mid-January through to that March 24 date of starting. There's lots of work that needs to be done during that mobilisation. Number one of that, of course, is ordering vehicles. And you had that explained to you in the extraordinary meeting, why that's important that we get cracking doing that as soon as possible. But there will be lots of other work as well, building on resident comms messages, rebuilding some of the IT systems if they're needed. Councillor Saunders touched on it. The appendices list all of the financial implications for you. Absolutely happy to answer questions. Duncan and Claire are on the call to be able to assist me with that. Just a reminder, they are exempt. They hold commercially sensitive data, and therefore I won't answer specific questions on finances during the open session. But just to say, the costs were included in the draft budget that went to P&R on the 30th of November. So final from me is that the report carries 4 recommendations from officers, which is to award the contract, to recommend to Council at P&R, then Council, to approve the fleet funding, to give a delegation for officers to complete the legal paperwork that backs up the arrangement that we have both with the contractor and with our Mid-Kent partners, and also for officers to go away and have a look at future depot options. I'm happy to take questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin. I thought it was a very clear and well presented report, so thank you for that. And it does appear as though we've gone through a pretty robust process with our partners to get to this stage. So I'm going to open it up to any questions and any comments that people have got. Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Chairman. Go first. I think this is a very important meeting, a very important decision, and I think that's illustrated by the fact that we've got a 100% turnout, 15 out of 15 members of the committee taking the time in Christmas week to come to an extraordinary meeting. I'd like to start by thanking officers because I'm sure they have put a tremendous amount of hard work into this. And I know from experience that these things are not easy to do. So thank you very much to the officers team. But oh dear, isn't this disappointing? Only one bidder. Only one bidder. So it looks like it's almost Hobson's Choice. I wonder why there is only one bidder. It's a shame that the current administration has gone out of its way to criticise the existing contract instead of working with the contractor to deliver the service. I'm sorry to say that I've been told that Swale has gained a reputation for being a difficult council to work with. I wonder if that's why we only ended up with one bidder. I regret that the new contract will see the loss of curbside collections of electrical equipment, textiles and batteries. I fear that those items will end up in the green bin. Having said that, there is much in the report to be welcome. There's lots of positive steps, and we have to acknowledge that there is need for improvement. There are areas that need improvement. So I welcome that. It's very difficult for us to make constructive comments about some of the provisions in the contract, because obviously we've not been party to them, and that's quite rightly so too. And it's very difficult to make comments about depot provision. I think that the question about depot provision is really dependent on where the existing bidder A's depot is. And I perhaps would like to explore that further in the exempt part, Chairman, because I feel I've got to be very careful not to stray into some of the blue paper. I'll leave it there.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your question. I mean, I would just comment that the contract's a joint one involving Ashford and Maidstone, and I'm not sure I quite recognise your characterisation of Swale. I think the officers have worked very hard with the contractor to get a good service. But Mr. Cassell, would you like to come in and respond to that?
First of all, absolutely appreciate the thanks to officers. I'm here fronting it tonight, but as you know, I have a great team behind me, and we will make sure that we pass that on to everyone that's worked on it. Difficult council to deal with. I think we undoubtedly have had some service disruption over the course of the 10 years, and therefore I don't apologise for managing the contract within the realms of trying to get a better and consistent service from the contractor in order to deliver. But that said, we absolutely understand our role in the Mid-Kent Partnership, and there are a number of things during that negotiation process where one or other council put forward their preference for the final specification, and on some we gave and on some we took. So it's definitely a partnership approach to how we've gone about this tender process. Glad that you recognise lots of positives and improvements. We're certainly proud of a number of those bullet points in section 3 that this contract is going to bring, notwithstanding the massive increase in technology that will give us a lot more data and allow us to respond to both members and residents a lot more positively. Curbside collection of WEEE textiles and batteries. Absolutely understand the concern. Taking away any service that's been there for a long time is a difficult decision. And all I can say is all 3 councils had to go through quite a lot of thought around how the best way to deal with that was. We do believe that there are better alternatives at the moment. The service of that collection, the collection of that item is sporadic, and we couldn't come up with a cost-effective way of continuing that service in the new one. But as you can see, there is the proposal to hold roadshows across the borough to allow residents to take their items for disposal. We have the household waste recycling sites, and we all generally visit a supermarket on a fairly regular basis, and they offer a good amount of recycling of these items as well. And depot provision, yeah, I think I'm happy to leave that for the extent part.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Councillor Nicholas Hampshire, would you like to?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I echo a lot of the comments that have been made by Councillor Simmons this evening, and I think actually the commentary to 4.5 in the report really sums it all up. You've got no choice but to accept what you've got here if you want to make sure you've got a waste collection service in place by the due date. So, you know, when you go into a bidding room, if you know that you're the only one, or likely to be the only one, there's no incentive necessarily to provide the most competitive price because you're backed into a corner. That's not how you run a negotiation. But a couple of things come to mind. One has already been said about the loss of the curbside as it is recycling of batteries. My fear here is that the batteries actually end up in the vehicles and then that creates damage, fires, etc. Because it is the most easiest and convenient thing for residents to do. Quite frankly, you know, we know how often it is if you get your plastic bag and you go down to the supermarket. I wonder how many people go, oh yeah, I must pick up those batteries and take those down to the supermarket and recycle all the time. So I actually think that exposes the council to risk. And actually, I think the contractor has got to be bent over a barrel, quite frankly, because per this report, it sounds as if you're going to be purchasing the vehicles because that saves some money on running costs. So those vehicles would most likely be purchased on a lease. My question therefore would be, are those vehicles able to be let out? Because you're taking all the risk of owning that vehicle, but you're not actually driving that vehicle. You're not controlling what necessarily goes in that vehicle, because then that vehicle explodes because the battery's got in, because it's got the surface. Who's going to cover the cost? Is it the council or is it the contractor that utilises it? And this report's absolutely silent on how that arrangement is there, because that is great for me as the service provider. I get my vehicle paid for me. All I've got to do is put fuel in it. I don't have to pay for the running cost of it, and I don't perhaps necessarily have to pay for repairs and maintenance. The council's going to do all of that because they're the ones that own the lease in the vehicle. And, you know, as I say, I think it's a real shame that there is only one bidder, but I think that is actually testament to the difficulties maybe that other bidders have had. And when you're going in and looking at these vehicles, we signed a policy that said that wherever possible, an EV vehicle will be used. Now, it is possible to buy EV waste vehicles. Per that policy, this council, in my opinion, is obligated to do so. That is at additional cost, because an EV vehicle costs a damn sight more than a diesel vehicle. So this administration has absolutely, totally balls this up, quite frankly. It has left itself with no choice, run the clock down, and exposed itself now to basically whatever a contractor wishes to charge, because it knows you're going to have to accept it. And I think that is quite telling in what is in the exempt items in terms of, you know, how that bit has been put together. But I'll come to that a bit later.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hampshire. So, Martin, I think the questions were about the competitiveness of the process. And then there was a question about the purchase of the vehicles and how that would be managed. And the final question or comment seemed to be about the costs associated with EV vehicles. and whether those were, you know, whether those should have been purchased. So do you want to address those?
Yeah, I'm going to try and stay within open setting on this as well, Councillor Hampshire. As the report said, the open report says there were more than one bidder involved throughout the majority of the process. It is a confidential process, and therefore all companies would have bid on the basis that they were in a competitive scenario. So there was no formal withdrawing of companies or anything like that. So I would expect that had no bearing whatsoever on the final pricing. The report also talks about the fact that it's quite a small industry anyway. It's not too many people can buy or operate a fleet of 26 ton vehicles, and therefore the industry is quite small anyway. So you start with a small base, and a number of the key players spoke to us at the start and said we have to choose which ones we bid for based upon what's available at the time. There were other major tenders happening at the same time, so we were aware that the pool was going to be fairly split. So in my opinion, and having got prices from multiple bidders throughout the competitive dialogue, in my opinion, we have a competitive tender sitting there in front of you. Batteries in the green being a risk, completely agree. Having lost a vehicle during this contract because of a battery fire, it is a complete risk. If we fail to collect somebody's carrier bag of batteries that's being placed on top of their wheeled bin, where do you think that generally goes? So that is currently a risk at the moment, and actually we see, you know, across the board in lots of different contracts, there's always that risk of batteries in there. We will do a really big campaign. I talked about the mobilisation period. There could potentially be a decision of when we take that decision to stop collecting it. We might not have to wait till the end of contract. I would come back to Environment Committee to have that discussion. Whenever we remove it, we would look to put a really big resident campaign in around exactly those risks, and how we think other alternatives are just as easy. Vehicles, it's a really difficult one to know how much detail or not to put in. So we will purchase the vehicles, not lease them. So they will be bought outright. There is a section in the financial implications in the open report that talks about how the contractor will, there is a vehicle schedule in place in the contract documents that details how the contractor will need to undertake repairs and maintenance of the vehicles. If a vehicle fails and they're unable to deliver a service, of course I have the contract documents, the performance mechanism, to be able to say you've not delivered the service and therefore there's a financial penalty on that, and we've strengthened it. As I put in the report, we've strengthened the performance mechanism a lot compared to the previous contract. There are masses of benefits of purchasing the vehicles. So at the moment, as the report says, we can borrow money at a lower rate than the private sector. We still get the benefit of contractor purchasing power. So if we were to buy them, the prices you'll see in the appendix would be at least 5% more for the capital of the fleet. So we get the best of both worlds. When we came to you for the extension, one of the reasons that we had to come to you for the extension and talk about an increase in cost of that was the very fact that we didn't own the fleet. So we didn't hold the negotiating power in that extension, as you say, because the fleet wasn't the council's. Moving forward as well, when you look at the risks of the economy and major contractors, if we got to the worst case scenario and a selected contractor ceased operation, the benefit for the council is that we would be able to put agency drivers in those vehicles the following day, and residents ultimately wouldn't see the difference. Whereas if the fleet wasn't ours, we wouldn't have recourse to those vehicles immediately. So there are pros and cons each way, but absolutely we're clear from financial benefit and for the control benefit of having the vehicles that's why we've gone with that option. Electric vehicles, yes, there are only a selection of electric vehicles that are proposed in this contract. That was very much feedback from all of the bidders that took part in the process. They don't believe that the vehicles that are currently on the market are suitable for Swales operation. That came from the contractors rather than a decision from us. And as much, the vehicles that we're buying are more efficient and better emissions than the current fleet. So we are naturally seeing an improvement with the addition of electric bin lifts. So at the moment, every time a bin is lifted into the back to empty, that's powered by diesel. Whereas on the new fleet, that would be powered by a battery, so not using diesel every time the bin's lifted. So that makes a good carbon emission reduction. And then obviously a new contract, we haven't done any major route and round optimisation for the last 10 years. Properties have come on board and developments have come on board. And so what that means is we've got fairly inefficient rounds. And so the opportunity to reroute and do some day changes will, as the report says, will look at around about 5 to 15% reduction in carbon emissions. So whilst absolutely I would love to have put 20 odd electric RCVs out there, the industry are telling us that they wouldn't be able to deliver the service on that, and the pricing would be very different to what you're seeing tonight.
Okay, I've got Councillor Thomas wanting to come in. If we could go to him next.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. I noted in the report that it states that the fragile nature of the current waste collection market, and I believe that's no doubt due to the current economic crisis that our country is currently having to endure. So from that, I'd like to congratulate the officers for still being able to negotiate a good deal for the residents of Swale that brings a better, more reliable and more environmentally friendly street cleaning and bin collection service. I also note from the report, paragraph 2.14, that Kent County Council are not helping our aims of carbon reduction, as they now require our vehicles to tip food waste at a different site to refuse and recycling. Now, whilst I appreciate that this evening we're discussing the local contracts, I do believe that high levels of government could do much more with better policies and better funding support for the waste collection industry to aid further carbon reduction. I hope that we will see central government taking a more proactive lead in the near future. Again, going back to the report, the contract that we're considering this evening has many positive initiatives, as listed in paragraph 3.3 on page 9 of our report. I particularly highlight the points that this new contract is aiming to increase recycling performance, this is only a few of the items, reduce carbon footprint of the waste contract, minimise any environmental impact, and have vehicles that do not have to return to the tip so often, i.e. by the way they'll be reconfigured, or a new one will be reconfigured. I'm looking forward to improved street cleaning with better use of mechanical sweepers. And electric vehicles and machines will be used for street cleaning and sweeping. That is one of the little questions I've got for you, Martin. What are beach sweepers? But fascinating with the new terminology there. So overall, I'm highly likely to support the proposal this evening as they prepare the way for the best value street cleaning and waste collection service for the residents as well, which is the most important thing in my mind. Thank you.
Okay, so just if you could pick up those points, Martin. So it was around the economic environment that potential bidders are having to operate in and bid into. KCC's role and the costs that might relate to them, and also the role of central government and its policies in relation to waste. And then I think what Councillor Thomas touched on, the various positive elements of the new specification, as well as the particular sweepers that you mentioned.
Yeah, if I take the last question first, I think you'll find that that is a more corporate term for the barrow boy or barrow person. So it's the person that walks up and down the street with a barrow in front of them. So my apologies for blinding you with new words there. Fragile nature. Yeah, I've been involved in a lot of contract negotiations. This is right up there in terms of thinking of everything that could possibly happen to counter against getting a good contract. We've seen it in these last 2 years, haven't we? Certainly things that I've never come across in the 20 years I've worked in local authority. It is fragile as a result, and as the report says, companies have to make a decision whether they're prepared to take the risk or not on council contracts. And during the negotiation, there was a lot of difficult conversations around protecting the council's interests, but also trying to engender those companies putting bids forward, because quite the same as you guys with tough decisions, their boards have to make tough decisions on what contracts to enter as well. So yeah, it's been difficult, but I do believe, as I say, with the comparators that we've got from an in-house service, a local authority controlled company, plus having had the quality, having had the submissions and the pricing from another bidder during the process, I feel we're getting good value from this proposal. Food waste at 2 sites. I don't think I want to labour too much on that. It adds an operational difficulty. Again, through negotiation, we feel we've done as much as we can with the makeup of vehicle to be able to mitigate that extra risk. Or extra risk and therefore extra cost. You know, I understand that other organisations have contracts to let as well. So, you know, and we clearly want to work with KCC moving forwards on all elements of disposal. Hire agencies need to support environmental engage. Yeah, with my other hat on, leading the climate and ecological emergency. You'll know, you've heard from me in previous meetings, how the decision not to do these things is a really difficult one, because actually the costs and the risks further down the line, maybe not for you and I in our lifetime, but for our children, are going to be huge. So we have to be doing as much as we can at the current time, but it absolutely, we need national, not only national, international policy to meet us on that. And that's one thing I can't control, I'm afraid, Councillor Thomas. Think I covered it.
Well, the other thing Councillor Thomas was touching on were the positive improvements in the new specification.
Yeah, so we've had to balance knowing the medium-term financial strategy of this council with, you know, not putting everything bells and whistles that we wanted in there. But there has to be that balance, because, you know, if we put 20 electric vehicles out there, we probably couldn't do another 4 or 5 services that this council offers at the current time. And you'll note that the reason that we've reduced it to 8 years and the reason that we've not put an extension clause in there is because we think in 8 years' time the industry will be in a very different position. We will be talking about collecting different things. We will be collecting in different types of vehicles, and that's why, again, that was a consideration over contract length and time.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Have we got any other questions before we move to the next agenda. Do you want to come back in very briefly, please, councillor Hitchin?
To come back to some comments raised. So, you're going to be borrowing money, and council's going to be borrowing money to purchase these vehicles, so I guess depreciating an asset. Let's just be clear, it's not the council's money, it's the residents of Swear's money, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who pay the council for that. Okay, so potentially they could be exposed to a risk, particularly if it were on a variable interest rate, because it's not necessarily detailed in the paper, it would be fixed and variable. And the other thing is, he said if the service can't be fulfilled, yes, there may be these penalty clauses, etc. I mean, I tell you what, I travel by train, and it's amazing that South Eastern sometimes meets its performance targets because the high speed is allowed to be considered. So I guarantee you, these companies will be able to prove that they've met certain targets because they can reach the statistics, because that's what South Eastern did years back when the mainline service didn't meet the performance target, but lo and behold, the high speed did. So overall, if you were a season ticket holder, you didn't get your rebate. And the thing there is, you said about contractors. Contractors are incredibly expensive. If you're going to have to rely on contractors to get you through periods whereby the service cannot be provided, how much exposure is the council going to be taking on? Because I don't think that's been necessarily considered in the financials, in the blue paper.
Okay, I think possibly the details of financing is something we should cover under the blue paper discussion, item 6, but targets, Martin, councillor Hampshire was asking about how those are going to be managed and well, basically I suppose it's about how performance is going to be managed.
Yeah, I can probably say a generic comment. Around the financing, obviously one of the recommendations asks the committee to give a delegation to Lisa as Section 151 officer to service that borrowing within the most advantageous way to the council. So that's why we've not put in there's fixed rate of 4%, because as I'm sure you're aware, borrowing rates are fluctuating a fair amount at the moment. So what we will look to do is a mixture of items, and that's what that delegation is looking for. And I can comment a little bit more in the exempt session on that. Depreciation, absolutely, they would be depreciated over the 8-year length of contract, because it's very unlikely that we will look to run the vehicles beyond the end of the contract life. In terms of targets, that's Alistair's world and Kelly's world. You know, we are every day dealing with all of our contractors, not just the waste contractors, making sure that they are delivering the service that we specify. And there are some days that that's not met, and there are other days where it's exceeded. Where it's not met, we absolutely use all of the mechanisms available to us to be able to get the quickest turnaround or recovery. So snow being a prime example, especially just before Christmas, they've done a tremendous job because of working with the team to try and make that recovery and get back so that they're ready for the Christmas period. So that's nothing new to us. Contract management is you know, our speciality, and we use every clause possible. The last resort is always using a formal written contract or using legal terms, but we have all of that in the background as well. So from my point of view, I'm comfortable that this performance mechanism, as explained, it's more stringent than the previous one because industry norms have changed, and it gives us more punchy financial abilities, penalties for the contractor. But that's always my last resort. You know, it's always picking the phone up to a contractor to talk about how we can help each other to recover the service in the first place. And I expect that to be no different in the next contract.
Thank you.
So I didn't quite understand that question, so I might ask you to rephrase it in a minute. I think what you're saying to me is if the current contractor fails, you understood from me that I was going to use another contractor for the recovery. Is that not what you're asking?
Contract visiting freelance staff.
So the current contract relies on agency staff and pool staff to a degree. As we talked about in the last extraordinary meeting, driver availability is very difficult. And so we have to rely on outside and agency workers to start with. What I would say is that a new contractor coming in or a new contract starting is often a good ability for staff to see stability and more likely to commit. In 14 months' time, we may be thinking, well, that was the day back in the day when there was a driver shortage. You know, there's lots of mechanisms that are going on now to get new staff. So does it sit as a item on the risk register that Alistair looks at every month? Absolutely. You know, not having the availability of staff or a vehicle breaking down because it's not being maintained, or a contractor going bust, they all sit on the council's corporate risk register and are considered as we go.
If I can add to
Yeah,
that,
come in.
I think contractors will also offer an element of resilience in delivering that service. So if there are problems such as the snow or the pandemic or even fires at depots, which we've experienced in the last few years in Mid Kent, they can bring in that resilience, they can bring in resources in order for us to deliver that service and return the service to what we expect more quickly.
Okay, thank you, Alistair. I've got three others wanting to come in. So Councillor Stephen, and then we'll go to Councillor Davey and Councillor Valentine. Councillor Stephen.
Martin, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, there was some discussion about by owning the vehicles, we have a future in the sense that they could be cost effective, that they could be converted later on into electric vehicles. So it gives us a lot more flexibility. I might be wrong, I'm not sure that's what I heard. So could you clarify for me?
Through you, Chair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to come in without going through. Yeah, absolutely. The point of owning the vehicles ourselves means we're in control of our destiny. So we were very fortunate to have a trial of an electric refuse truck recently that was a conversion of an old diesel vehicle. So the reality is the industry is looking at lots of different ways of providing these vehicles, and I would suggest that again, you know, if we own them, we're more able to adapt them. Should that be the way forward?
Yeah, that's what.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Stephen. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair. I'll stay and take a leave. Firstly, thank you for the report and the items at 3.3. It's good that we've basically been repaired. So I know one was it, and also something I've raised previously, Councillor Saunders, the cessation of the use of glyphosate. That's the correct pronunciation of weed by the street owner. So that's a couple of very good points there. I do find it, and I've got a lot of time for council meetings, here. But I do find it extraordinary that you would assume that Martin and his team here and the team in Maidstone and Ashford would tell a bit about who the only one. It's just not, it's not anything you do. You know, you don't go through the process telling people that you're the only one in the room and you can charge what you like. I think that was obvious anyway, but I thought I'd point it out again. And also I found it a little bit disparaging to say that Swale Borough Council are difficult to deal with. We may be difficult people here on the benches, but we had no part of the negotiation. It's down to our officers, and again, we've been in the work that these people put in. They do put it on, and I've always found Martin very easy to deal with. I would like to address the curbside collection, which, if you remember, we raised at the briefing we had, which was in Swale House. And I'm a bit of an old crusty, I've been recycling for many years. And I tend to just walk my batteries up to the local electrical shop. I think the problem we have with the current contract is with the set routes, if you're last on the list for collection, your stuff's never going to be collected anyway. And it does say on the batteries, please dispose of safely. And if people think the safest thing to do is to cut them in half and throw them in fires, then we've got something to do on education. And we did discuss at the briefing again, that there was going to be a lot of comms done in advance of this new contract. And can I ask while I'm here, because this is kind of applicable to the curbside collection, what is the current rejection rate for our blue bins? People know what's supposed to be in blue bins already, and we have quite a lot of rejection of blue bins because people, I was going to say, can't be bothered. To follow simple procedures where you've got a big picture on the top that tells you what you can and can't do. And I got a thing a few years ago at the pub, which was a simple pictogram, which I just stuck on the wall, what you can and can't stick in the bin. So if you could answer that question, I'd be much obliged. So thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor David. There's a number of points there. Do you want to pick up on that last point? And then I think there was stuff about the process with the potential provider as well. You might have to comment on further.
Yeah, I may well look at Alistair if but we can, if not, we can come back to you. The current rejection rate is quite low, but actually we then get quite a high rejection rate at the recycling facility where there is contamination. So you will have heard at the last Environment Committee me talking about the need for quite a lot of behaviour change comms around trying to shift people. I don't think, clearly there are some people that may choose just not to follow rules because that's their inclination. But I think genuinely most of us try to recycle things the right way. We just don't always know the answer. So it's our job to provide that education with things like the Waste Wizard on the website and the regular bin stickers and comms and things like that. We are, one of the benefits of this proposal is that the proposed contractor is really keen to work with us on that contamination. And we've seen some really great results recently where it won't be universally popular with residents because we've refused to take bins. And when queried, we've said this was the reason why. And as a result, on a whole street that we went and did that, we managed to convert eight properties on that road to have food caddies, because food is principally the biggest contaminant in our bins, that and nappies, for some reason. So I think we need to do a lot of work, and I think confidently we can do that through this contract. The contractor is proposing to have some resource to be able to do that with us, so work in partnership with us. But certainly the current rejection rate is not as high as I would like it, because if we're not rejecting it at curbside, it means it's getting to a whole load at a recycling facility, and that whole load is lost instead of just that one wheelie bin. So it's really important that we work really hard on those comms messages. And I've put a reasonable sum in reserves to be able to try and take this new contract as an opportunity to reset some of that recycling behaviour. Curbside collection, I think that was just supporting the positives there. Wheelie bin repairs, I would ideally not collect any rubbish from curbside, because if you look at the hierarchy of the waste cycle, it's don't have it in the first place. So a wheelie bin repair is much better than throwing what could be a perfectly serviceable bin into the recycling and sending a new one out. So that was quite key for us in our conversations. We've obviously installed the charge for replacement bins throughout. This is the first year that we've done that, and clearly that will offer an alternative option to residents just to have a repair rather than a full replacement, which would be more cost effective than the full replacement. So ideally, I want to stop it coming to curbside. I reduce the waste as much as possible. I'd rather not have anyone throwing food away in caddies. Because actually, if it was recycled on your property or not wasted in the first place, that's better for the environment than us driving lots of lorries around the borough. So in that hierarchy, yeah, absolutely, we're trying to pick little bits away each time we have those conversations to try and reduce what's going out in curbside in the first place.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Councillor, sorry,
May I just,
yeah,
thank you for that.
yeah.
With regards to figures, on a regular load that gets taken to the material recycling centre, around 10% of the contents of the recycling bin are what's called objectionable contaminants. And that's what we're trying to educate against, those materials which Martin alluded to, the textiles, the dirty nappies. It's mainly those materials that are going in, but on average, it's around 10%. If it creeps up above 20%, they look at rejecting the entire load because the contamination levels are just too high.
Okay, thank you, Alistair. Councillor Valentine.
I find it interesting that we're sat here listening to the Conservative members complaining about the lack of competitiveness in the waste collection industry. And yet it seems to me the Conservative Party were the one who thought that taking these contracts, as many contracts as possible, out to the private market was the cure for all ills. But I share their concerns. It is disappointing that we've only got one bidder. Though having read the report and of course I've spoken to Martin and the other officers over time, I am satisfied that we've got a competitive bid in the process that we went through with that. Would have led to a competitive bid for that. We had more than one bidder right up until the very final process. And then Conservatives are complaining about the loss of the collection service for electrical waste, textiles and batteries. Yeah, I can remember a time in council when Councillor Simmons complained that he saw the bin men lift up his bag of electrical waste which was left beside the bin and drop it into the green bin before tipping it into the lorry. So I think there's nothing worse than a service that purports to be there, but in reality isn't. And we've known for a long time that the collection of the electrical waste and textiles, batteries doesn't really work. The lorries aren't equipped to carry them. We haven't been promoting the service for since before this administration was in power, and we're pretending there's a service there that isn't there. Textiles are one of the leading contaminants of our blue bins. So I think it's a pragmatic decision to say that we can't provide this service, and we need to appoint members from the public and educate them into the other relatively easy sources for recycling that are available for those materials. And then we hear the opposition complaining that Swale is a difficult council to work with. But I think quite rightly, the opposition complain loudly when bins are missed. Other failures happen with the contract. And our officers do a very good job in trying to enforce the contract and get the level of performance that we're paid for. But we are working with a very bare bones contract, one that was negotiated on price rather than quality of service to our residents. And there are few resources, not sufficient resources in the existing contract in order to be able to deliver the service we expect to see. And so, I mean, we are in very difficult times. The costs have gone very high. The waste industry, all the companies have been buying each other out. There are fewer companies in the market already. So I think under those circumstances, I think in particular to see the improvement to the street sweeping service, which has been a major cause of complaint, and I think quite right under the existing contract. I think for the officers to be able to deliver a contract that improves street sweeping when we face such difficulties with the waste contract, I think it's very commendable. Congratulate them on that in particular. And there are other improvements that have already been mentioned. On electric vehicles, I would love to see a contract where we had electric vehicles. Of course, we've been trying to work towards that. But the truth of the matter is that we're just not in a position where we can do that. It's not only the cost of the electric vehicles, it's the length of the routes. So the councils that haven't been able to introduce EVs tend to be urban councils that have smaller routes where electric vehicles are more suitable for the routes than we have. And it's not just the vehicles, you need a depot that can charge 20 large vehicles overnight and have the electricity supply to do that. And that's another position where we're not ready yet. But I think owning the vehicles, getting the improvement of the electric lift on these vehicles. At the moment, you'll notice when the bin lorry is outside your house lifting your bins, the engine is being revved in order to provide the power for the lift. And so that will produce a significant improvement in environmental performance. And with the other road sweeping vehicles and supervisors' vehicles being electric, I think we are doing what we can. But I would particularly point out recommendation 4, where it recommends that we work on looking at the provision of our own depot. And I think we want to already be looking towards the end of this contract, where we can hopefully then be in a better position where we may be able to provide the service through a local authority company or use direct service. And if with this scope for having a suitable depot for electric vehicles to be charged at, we might be in a much better place in the future than we are now. So I was there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Valentine. Did you want to come back on any of those points, Martin, before we move on?
I'll stay silent on a number of the points, but the EV charging overnight, I think you answered the question in the way that I would have responded, which is by looking at options in the future for depots. Again, that potentially puts us in control of our own destiny. So one of the things that the bidders mentioned on charging lots of big lorries overnight was that UK Power Networks can't always provide the power to the site. So having our own depot and being able to work on getting that power into the site long term will give us a much better ability to deliver electric vehicles moving forwards, notwithstanding the fact that if we have a big building there, we can put solar panels on the top and start to generate some of our own as well. So that's why I'm really keen for us not to go, let's award the contract where the contractor has a perfectly suitable site for their depot. Let's just not worry about that in 8 years' time. That's why I've specifically put the delegation in there for myself and the property team to start that process and make sure that we're future-proofing for the future. If that makes sense. Don't know if you do it for the past, but.
Okay, thanks, Martin. I think we've had some good input, some good questions and discussion. A number of people have said they want to ask questions in relation to the blue papers. So my suggestion now is that we move to those, which means that we need to initially move to agenda item 5. So this will require us to exclude the press and public. So can I ask if members wish to decide whether to pass the resolution set out below in respect of the following item? So that under section 100A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Act. And paragraph 3 and 4 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Act. Paragraph 3 is information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. And paragraph 4 is information relating to any consultations or negotiations or contemplated consultations or negotiations in connection with any labour relations matters arising between the authority or a minister of the Crown and any employees of or office holders under the authority. Do you agree with that? Do you wish to move on to 6? Thank you very much. Okay, so Martin. Okay, yeah, sorry, we need a break.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So could I have a proposer or a recommendation? Sorry, councillor True and a seconder, councillor Valentine. Okay, can I ask those in favour of the 4 recommendations to show?
Nine.
Yep. Got 10.
Oh, I didn't count the chairs. Apologies.
Okay, so those against. That means we haven't got any abstention. Yeah. Okay, thank you, everyone. So that means I think that we've agreed those recommendations by 10 votes to 5.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And I don't think there's anything else we need to do. So thank you, everyone. And I declare the meeting closed at 20:54.